The council chamber stretched wide like an arena, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Lights dimmed as the session began, casting long shadows across the curved walls. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections, some breathing oxygen like the humans, others encased in specialized environmental suits. The air hummed with translation devices, converting thousands of languages into understanding. Ambassador Daniel Wright stood at the central platform, a human among giants. His dark suit seemed plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other delegates. Behind him, two other humans waited with data tablets glowing softly in their hands. Commander Lisa Morgan, a woman with sharp eyes and military bearing, held tactical reports. Paul Gardner, a scientist with graying hair, clutched his research findings like they were made of gold. Daniel cleared his throat and began speaking. His voice carried through the chamber with surprising strength for someone so small, compared to the towering Vexar or the massive Lithians. He explained what human deep space monitoring stations had detected 3 months ago. An energy anomaly had appeared at the edge of known space, beyond the furthest colonies and outposts. At first they thought it was a natural phenomenon, perhaps a new type of star or a quantum fluctuation, but the anomaly moved with purpose. It consumed 3 uninhabited star systems in the span of 6 weeks. The pattern was deliberate, methodical. Human scientists studied the readings for weeks, running simulations and comparing data. Paul Gardner stepped forward and displayed holographic projections showing the anomaly's path. It was heading toward inhabited space, and it was accelerating. The Vexar delegation stirred first. These beings stood 3 meters tall, with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns. They were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest scientists, the most logical minds. Their lead representative, a being named Zekthul, rose from his seat. His voice resonated like wind chimes in a storm. "The human delegation presents interesting data," Zekthul said, his tone polite but dismissive. "However, we must consider the source. Human sensor technology is, by galactic standards, quite primitive. What you interpret as a directed threat may simply be natural phenomena your equipment cannot properly analyze. We Vexar have studied the cosmos for 10,000 of your years. Such anomalies are rare but not unprecedented. They dissipate naturally given time." Daniel tried to respond, but the Lithian section erupted with their own commentary. The Lithians were ancient, their civilization predating most spacefaring races by millennia. They appeared almost humanoid, but with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed with inner light. Their eldest speaker, a being who claimed to remember events from 5,000 years past, spoke with the weight of ages. "Young humans," the Lithian elder said, his voice tired and condescending. "We understand your concern. Your species has only traveled the stars for 200 years. Everything seems threatening when you are new to the galaxy. But we have seen countless phenomena come and go. The universe is vast and often frightening to those who do not yet understand it. This anomaly will pass as all things pass. Your fear is natural but unnecessary." Lisa Morgan stepped forward, her military training evident in every movement. She brought up tactical displays showing projected paths, threat assessments, and defensive options. She explained how human military analysts had run thousands of simulations. Every model showed the same result. If the anomaly maintained its current course and speed, it would reach council space within 18 months. If it maintained its consumption pattern, it would devastate inhabited systems. The Krell delegation responded with clicking sounds that the translation devices converted into scornful laughter. The Krell were insectoid, with multiple limbs and compound eyes that saw in spectrums invisible to most species. They moved in, perfectly synchronized groups thinking and speaking as one. Their hive mind gave them perspectives alien to individual-minded races. "Humans seek attention," the Krell collective voice stated. "Humans always push for larger military budgets. Humans see threats everywhere because humans are by nature aggressive and paranoid. This presentation serves human interests. More ships, more weapons, more resources directed toward human military expansion. We Krell see through this manipulation. We vote against entertaining these fabricated concerns." Paul Gardner tried one more time. He displayed mathematical models, energy readings, and comparative analysis with known natural phenomena. Nothing in the database matched what they were seeing. The anomaly exhibited signs of intelligence, or at least directed purpose. It didn't behave like a storm or a quantum fluctuation. It behaved like something built, something programmed, something hunting. But the council had made up their minds. Species after species stood to dismiss the human warnings. Some were polite about it, thanking the humans for their diligence but suggesting they were mistaken. Others were openly hostile, accusing humanity of warmongering and fearmongering. A few simply ignored the presentation entirely, conducting their own business as if the humans weren't speaking. The vote came swiftly. Should the Galactic Council allocate resources to investigate the anomaly and prepare defensive measures? The result was overwhelming. 347 votes against, 12 votes in favor. The only supporters were minor species who had little political power and even less respect within the council structure. Daniel Wright stood at the platform as the vote total displayed above him. He didn't argue. He didn't shout or plead or make dramatic declarations. He simply nodded once, gathered his data tablets, and turned to leave. Lisa Morgan and Paul Gardner followed without a word. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. Something about their silence disturbed the council members more than any protest would have. The humans had not fought back. They had not appealed the decision or demanded reconsideration. They had simply accepted the verdict and left. It felt wrong somehow, like the moment before lightning strikes when the air goes still and heavy. As the human delegation walked through the massive doors of the council chamber, Ambassador Daniel Wright stopped. He turned back to face the assembled representatives one last time. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly despite the vast distance. "We came to you with truth," Daniel said. "We offered our analysis, our resources, and our assistance freely. The Council has decided our contribution is unwanted. We respect that decision. Humanity will withdraw and see to our own affairs. We wish you all well." Then they were gone. The doors sealed behind them with a soft hiss. The council chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then the Vexar began celebrating their victory over human militarism. The Lithians spoke of returning to an age of philosophical pursuits without human interference. The Krell clicked their approval of putting the aggressive young species in their place. But a few members sat quietly, unable to shake a growing sense of unease. The humans had been involved in council affairs for 50 years. They had provided military protection, technological innovation, and logistical support across dozens of joint operations. They had been loud, opinionated, and often pushy about defense matters. Everyone knew the humans. Everyone had opinions about the humans. That's what made their silence so unsettling. The humans should have fought harder. They should have argued and protested and demanded to be heard. That's what humans did. They were passionate to the point of being annoying. They cared too much about everything. They never simply gave up and walked away. In the human embassy, 3 levels below the council chamber, Daniel Wright gathered his senior staff. They stood in a conference room that had hosted hundreds of meetings over the years. Charts covered the wall showing joint operations, trade agreements, and defense coordination with council species. Photos displayed human diplomats shaking, hands, claws, and tentacles with their galactic counterparts. "Begin Operation Homeward," Daniel said quietly. "All personnel are to pack personal effects only. We leave everything else. Notify our ships to begin withdrawal from council space. All trade agreements are canceled. All defense pacts are void. All joint research projects are terminated. We're going home." Lisa Morgan pulled up a tactical map showing human positions throughout council space. Defense fleets guarded trade routes. Military advisors trained council forces. Human ships patrolled borders and responded to emergencies. Over 5,000 military personnel were scattered across 100 systems. "It'll take time to coordinate a full withdrawal," she said. "We have time," Daniel replied. "The anomaly won't reach council space for over a year. We'll be gone in 3 months. Make it orderly. Make it complete and make it quiet. No explanations, no debates, no goodbyes. We simply leave. Paul Gardner stared at the research data still displayed on his tablet. Years of work, thousands of discoveries made in collaboration with council scientists. All of it would be left behind. They'll realize we were right eventually, he said softly. When that thing gets here, they'll know. Daniel nodded. Yes, they'll know. But by then, it will be their problem to solve. He looked at each of his staff members in turn. The council has made their choice. They don't want our warnings or our help we gave. The first ship to leave was the Liberty's Hope, a massive colony vessel that had been docked at the Vexar research station for 3 years. It housed 200 human scientists and their families who had been working on joint gravitational studies with Vexar researchers. The project was close to breakthrough, or so the Vexar claimed. Everyone expected another 2 years of collaboration. On a Tuesday morning, station sensors registered the Liberty's Hope, powering up its main engines. The Vexar station master, curious about the unscheduled activity, sent a communication asking if there was a problem. The human captain, a woman named Kelly Brooks, responded with a simple message. No problem. Departing station. Thank you for your hospitality. Before the Vexar could ask for clarification, the massive ship disengaged from the docking clamps and moved away from the station. Its engines flared bright blue as it accelerated toward the hyperspace jump point. Within an hour it was gone, leaving behind empty laboratories and confused Vexar scientists who kept asking where their human colleagues had gone. The same scene played out across council space. The defense fleet that had been protecting Lithian trade routes for 6 years suddenly went dark. All 73 human warships powered down their transponders, aligned themselves in perfect formation, and jumped to hyperspace simultaneously. The Lithian trade coordinator tried desperately to contact the fleet commander, but received only an automated message. Human defense forces are withdrawing from council space. Please make alternative security arrangements. On the planet Krell Prime, human merchants who had operated trading posts for decades began closing their shops. They sold nothing, gave away nothing, and explained nothing. They simply packed their goods, locked their doors, and headed to the spaceport. A Krell shopkeeper who had worked next to a human trading post for 15 years watched in confusion as his neighbor loaded crates onto transport vehicles. Where are you going? The Krell asked through his translation device. The human merchant, a man named Greg Hamilton, paused in his work. He looked at the Krell with an expression that might have been sad or might have been tired. Home, Greg said simply. Going home. When will you return? Greg secured the last crate and climbed into the transport vehicle. We won't, he said, and drove away toward the spaceport. The Krell stood there watching the empty shop, not understanding what had just happened. At the Central Council building, other species began noticing the pattern. Human representatives stopped attending committee meetings. Human liaisons didn't show up for scheduled appointments. The human embassy building, which had always buzzed with activity, went quiet. The lights were on, but no one answered communications. Ambassador Daniel Wright requested one final meeting with the full council. When the representatives assembled, they found him standing alone at the central platform. No staff, no displays, no presentations. Just one human in a plain suit. Humanity officially withdraws from all Galactic Council territories and protectorates, Daniel said, his voice steady and clear. Effective immediately, all defense agreements are canceled. All trade contracts are void. All research partnerships are terminated. All joint operations are concluded. We will no longer burden the Council with our presence or our concerns. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The Vexar representative stood up, his crystalline face showing what might have been concern. Ambassador Wright, this seems like an extreme reaction to one disagreement. Perhaps we can discuss this matter more thoroughly. Daniel shook his head. There is nothing to discuss. The Council voted. We respect that vote. Humanity will see to its own affairs from now on. Goodbye. He walked out of the chamber. He did not look back. Behind him, the Council erupted in confusion and debate. Some species celebrated, claiming they had finally rid themselves of human aggression and paranoia. Others expressed concern about the sudden loss of human military support. A few demanded to know what humanity was planning, suspicious of hidden motives. But Ambassador Daniel Wright was already on a shuttle heading to the human flagship positioned at the edge of Council space. He carried only a single bag containing personal items. Everything else, furniture, art, diplomatic gifts accumulated over years of service, remained in the embassy, abandoned like relics of a finished era. Captain Ryan Bell commanded the evacuation operation from the bridge of the human carrier Defiance. His screens displayed the positions of every human vessel in Council space and the status of every human installation. The logistics were staggering. Thousands of people, hundreds of ships, all needing to move in an orderly fashion back to human territory. "Status report," Ryan said to his operations officer. Lieutenant Nicole Grant checked her displays. 70% of personnel have boarded transport ships. Military installations are being powered down in sequence. Trade stations are closed. Embassy staff are en route to pickup points. "We're ahead of schedule, sir." Ryan nodded. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The humans were leaving no mess behind. No unfinished business, no loose ends. They were simply disappearing from Council space like morning fog burned away by sunlight. "Any resistance from Council authorities?" "None, sir. They seem confused but not hostile. Some have tried to initiate communications asking us to reconsider, but we've maintained silence per operational orders." On the planet Vexar Prime, human engineers worked through the night to shut down the defense systems they had installed 5 years earlier. These systems protected the Vexar homeworld from potential asteroid strikes and space debris. The Vexar had designed the systems, but humans had built them and maintained them. The engineers made sure everything was properly powered down and left detailed instructions for Vexar technicians to operate the systems themselves. One young Vexar technician watched the humans work, his crystalline features reflecting the glow of computer screens. "Why are you leaving?" he asked one of the engineers, a woman named Amy Peterson. Amy didn't stop working as she answered, "We're not wanted here, so we're going home. But the defense grid needs maintenance. Who will handle repairs?" "You will," Amy said, finishing her final shutdown sequence. She handed the young Vexar a data pad containing all the technical specifications and maintenance protocols. "It's all here. Your people are smart. You'll figure it out." "But we worked well together," the Vexar protested. "Why must this end over one disagreement?" Amy looked at him for a long moment. "It's not about one disagreement. It's about respect. Your leaders made it clear they don't respect our judgment or our contributions. We can't work with people who see us as paranoid children, so we're leaving. Good luck with everything." She walked out of the control center, leaving the young Vexar holding the datapad and feeling like something important had just broken. Across Council space, similar conversations played out thousands of times. Human doctors left hospitals, training local medical staff in quick sessions before departing. Human teachers at joint educational facilities held final classes and said quiet goodbyes to confused students. Human military advisors handed over security responsibilities to Council forces who suddenly realized how much they had relied on human expertise. The Lithian Philosophical Institute lost 3 human researchers who had been studying ancient texts with Lithian scholars for a decade. The humans packed up their notes, thanked their colleagues politely, and left. One Lithian scholar, an elderly being named Teleran, actually wept as his human research partner departed. They had been working together so long that Teleran had started to see the human as family. "Please don't go," Teleran pleaded. "Our work is not finished." The human researcher, a man named Stephen Carter, embraced the old Lithian gently. "I'm sorry, friend. I truly am. But my government has made its decision. We're all going home. Because of the vote? Because we didn't believe your anomaly report?" Stephen pulled back and looked Talaran in his glowing eyes. "It's bigger than that. Your leaders see us as inferior, as paranoid warmongers who can't be trusted. How can we work together when there's no respect? I'll miss you, old friend, but I can't stay where my people aren't valued." He left. Teleran stood in the empty research room, surrounded by texts they had been translating together, and felt the weight of loss settle on his ancient shoulders. The withdrawal continued for weeks. Human cargo ships hauled equipment and supplies back toward human space. Passenger transports carried families and civilians. Military vessels escorted the convoys, maintaining perfect formation and discipline. Not a single incident occurred. No fights, no accidents, no confrontations. The humans left as professionally as they had served. The Krell hive mind tried to contact the human military coordinator to discuss transition procedures for the defense sectors humans had been managing. But the humans wouldn't take the calls. They simply transmitted all relevant data to Krell systems and continued their departure. The Krell found themselves suddenly responsible for protecting vast regions of space without any preparation or training. Council authorities grew increasingly agitated. They sent formal requests asking humanity to slow down and discuss proper transition procedures. They offered incentives for humans to stay. They even apologized for the dismissive tone of some council members during the anomaly. 6 months passed since the last human left council space. Life continued as it always had. Trade flowed between worlds. Diplomacy continued in the Great Council chambers. Species pursued their interests and resolved their conflicts through debate and compromise. Some council members had already forgotten about the humans. Others mentioned them occasionally, usually with relief that the paranoid warmongers were no longer influencing council policy. The Vexar threw themselves into pure scientific research, celebrating their freedom from human military considerations. The Lithians expanded their philosophical institutes, pleased to pursue wisdom without human interference. The Krell restructured their defense networks, convinced they could manage security better than the aggressive humans ever had. Then the Krell colony world of Teklar went silent. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon by Galactic Standard Time. The planet's communication arrays simply stopped transmitting. At first, the Krell hive mind assumed it was a technical malfunction. Teklar was a minor colony, only 50 million. Krell, relatively new and still developing its infrastructure. Equipment failures happened. The Krell sent an investigation fleet to check on the colony. 3 ships jumped into the Teklar system and immediately tried to establish contact with the surface. They received no response. Orbital scans showed the cities were still standing. Buildings intact, infrastructure undamaged, but no power signatures, no electromagnetic emissions, no signs of life at all. The investigation team landed on the surface. What they found horrified them. The cities were completely empty, not destroyed, not damaged, just empty. Every piece of technology was dead, drained of all power. Computer systems were blank husks. Power plants were cold and silent. Even simple batteries were completely discharged. And the Krell themselves were gone. 50 million beings had simply vanished. The investigation fleet returned to Krell Prime with their impossible report. The hive mind struggled to understand what had happened. Then the sensors detected something approaching from deep space. The anomaly, the thing the humans had warned about. It was real, and it was here. Panic spread through the council faster than any disease. The Vexar immediately pulled all their deep space data and began analyzing the phenomenon properly. What they found made their crystalline skin pale to near transparency. The humans had been right about everything. The anomaly was not natural. It was artificial, ancient, and impossibly destructive. Zekthul, the Vexar scientist who had dismissed human warnings 6 months earlier, stood before an emergency council session. His voice no longer carried the confident resonance it once had. Instead, it shook with fear as he explained what his people had discovered. The anomaly is a von Neumann swarm, Zekthul said, displaying holographic projections that looked eerily similar to what Paul Gardner had shown months ago. It is a self-replicating weapons system, likely created millions of years ago. It consumes all technology and energy it encounters, converting matter into copies of itself. It grows exponentially, it adapts to defenses, and it is heading directly toward the Council Core worlds. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations. The Lithian elders searched their vast archives, looking for any historical reference to such a phenomenon. They found it buried in their oldest records, texts so ancient they predated the Lithians' spacefaring age. The records spoke of the consuming silence, a catastrophe that had destroyed their prehistoric civilization and forced them to rebuild from nothing. It is not a myth, the eldest Lithian announced, his glowing eyes dim with horror. Our ancestors survived this, barely. They left warnings, but over millennia the warnings became legends and the legends became myths. We forgot. And now it returns. The council tried to organize a defense. Military commanders from various species gathered to develop strategies, but they quickly discovered a terrible problem. The Council's military forces were scattered, disorganized, and poorly coordinated. The humans had been providing the majority of tactical planning and rapid response capabilities. Without them, the Council's defense infrastructure was revealed to be far weaker than anyone had realized. Numbers told the grim story. Humans had supplied 40% of the Council's active defense fleet. They had trained 60% of all tactical officers. They had maintained the early warning systems that detected threats. They had coordinated responses to emergencies. All of that was gone now, and the remaining Council forces didn't know how to fill the gaps. The Krell hive mind attempted to coordinate a defensive fleet to intercept the swarm before it reached more populated systems. They gathered 200 ships, the largest force they could muster quickly. The fleet jumped to intercept the swarm at the edge of Krell territory. They had weapons that could destroy planets, shields that could withstand star-level radiation. They were confident they could stop the threat. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The swarm adapted to every weapon the Krell used. It overwhelmed their shields through sheer numbers. The swarm didn't fight like a traditional enemy. It simply consumed. Ships that were struck by the swarm's nanomachines found their systems failing one by one. Power drained away, weapons went offline, life support shut down. Of the 200 ships that engaged the swarm, only 33 escaped to report the disaster. Another Krell colony fell. Then a Vexar research station went dark. The swarm was advancing faster than the Council had predicted, consuming systems at an accelerating rate. It was learning, adapting, becoming more efficient with each encounter. In human space, far beyond the sealed borders, Lieutenant Nicole Grant sat at her monitoring station aboard Nova Station, a massive defense platform that guarded the human frontier. Her screens showed Council communications channels, and she listened to the growing panic with the expressionless face. Every day brought new reports of systems lost, populations evacuated, desperate battles fought and lost. She compiled the reports and forwarded them to human military command. She never received acknowledgement. No one seemed interested in what was happening in Council space. Humanity had moved on, focusing on their own territory and their own concerns. The Council's crisis was not their problem. The Council sent Ambassador Zek Thul to the human border. The once proud Vexar scientist had changed drastically in the months since humanity's departure. His crystalline skin had lost its luster. His posture was bent with exhaustion and stress. He arrived at Nova Station in a small diplomatic vessel, requesting permission to speak with human authorities. Commander Jake Foster met him in a conference room with transparent walls that looked out at the stars. Jake was a career military officer, stern and professional. He had served with the Council Defense Forces for years before the withdrawal. He knew Zek Thul personally, had even considered him a friend once, but his expression now was cold and unwelcoming. Ambassador Zek Thul, Jake said, his tone formal and distant. State your business. Zek Thul tried to maintain his dignity, but desperation cracked his voice. Commander Foster, the Council requests humanity's immediate assistance. The swarm is consuming our territory. We have lost 6 colonies and 12 major stations. Billions of beings are in danger. We need your help. Jake stood with his arms crossed, his face showing nothing. The Council made its position clear 6 months ago. The anomaly was not a concern. Human warnings were dismissed as paranoia. Why would the Council need help with something that isn't a threat? We were wrong, Zek Thul said, and the admission seemed to physically pain him. The humans were correct. The threat is real. We should have listened. We should have prepared, but we didn't. And now our people are dying. Please, we are begging for assistance. The Council rejected our help when it would have cost nothing, Jake replied, his voice flat and emotionless. You mocked our science, insulted our judgment, and dismissed our concerns. Now you come here begging after your worlds are burning. The answer is no. Zek Thul tried again, offering everything he could think of. Technology transfers, territorial, concessions, trade agreements, raw materials, anything humanity wanted. He spoke of the billions of innocent beings who would die if the swarm wasn't stopped. He pleaded with Jake to show mercy, to be better than the council had been, to help, despite the past. Jake listened to all of it without changing expression. When Zekthul finally ran out of words, Jake spoke again. Let me be very clear. Humanity offered the council truth when it cost us nothing. You rejected it. We offered alliance when it would have saved millions. You mocked it. Now you offer bribes when your worlds burn, and you expect us to forget how we were treated. The council must bear the consequences of its choices. You would let entire civilizations die to prove a point? Zekthul asked, his voice breaking. We're not letting anyone die, Jake corrected. The council is killing its own people through arrogance and pride. We warned you this was coming. We gave you time to prepare. You chose not to believe us. Those deaths are on your hands, not ours. We will defend our own borders. What happens in council space is no longer our concern. Jake stood and gestured toward the door. Your ship will be escorted back to council space. Do not return. Humanity has nothing more to say to the council. Zekthul left Nova Station in defeat. Behind him, Jake Foster returned too. The swarm consumed council space like fire through dry grass. What started as isolated incidents became a full crisis within weeks. The Vexar lost 3 colony worlds in a single month. The massive crystalline structures they had built over centuries were stripped of all energy, left as empty shells floating in space. Billions of Vexar evacuated ahead of the swarm's advance, fleeing toward the core worlds with only what they could carry. The Krell suffered even worse. Their hive clusters, which required constant technological support to maintain their collective consciousness, were priority targets for the swarm. When a hive lost power, individual Krell became confused and disoriented, unable to function without their connection to the collective mind. Entire populations simply collapsed when the swarm hit them. The Krell hive mind, which had spoken with such confidence months ago, now broadcast nothing but static and screams. The Lythian homeworld, ancient and proud, came under direct threat as the swarm reached the inner territories. The Lithians had survived for thousands of years, had built civilization upon civilization, had accumulated wisdom that other species could barely comprehend. None of it mattered against an enemy that consumed everything without thought or mercy. The Lithians began evacuating their most precious artifacts and texts, watching helplessly as their heritage was threatened with extinction. Emergency council sessions became daily occurrences. Representatives who had once debated philosophy and trade policy now argued desperately about evacuation routes and last-stand defenses. The council chamber, which had hosted thousands of years of civilized discussion, echoed with panic and accusations. Species blamed each other for the disaster. Old alliances fractured under the pressure of survival. The Vexar accused the Lithians of arrogance. If the Ancient Ones had remembered their own history, if they had taken the warning seriously, this could have been prevented. The Lithians fired back, claiming Vexar scientific pride had dismissed human evidence that could have saved everyone. The Krell pointed at both species, insisting their dismissal of human concerns had created this catastrophe. Round and round the accusations went, accomplishing nothing except wasting time that no one had to spare. Military forces from different species refused to coordinate. The Vexar wanted to focus on protecting their core industrial worlds. The Lithians insisted on defending cultural heritage sites. The Krell prioritized hive clusters above all else. Without human tactical planning to tie these conflicting priorities together, the Council's defense became fragmented and ineffective. Ships that should have been protecting evacuation routes were instead positioned to defend empty monuments. Small species, the ones with little political power who had voted to support human warnings months ago, suffered the worst. Their homeworlds fell to the swarm while Council forces focused on protecting major species. The Council, which claimed to represent all sentient life equally, showed its true nature in crisis. Some lives mattered more than others when resources were scarce and time was running out. At Nova Station, Commander Jake Foster received another communication from Council Space. This time it wasn't an ambassador. It was a general broadcast, a plea sent to every system within range. The message was simple and desperate. Any species with the ability to help, please respond. The Council was dying, and they were begging anyone who would listen. Jake played the message for his senior staff. They sat in silence, listening to the fear and desperation in voices that had once spoken with such authority and confidence. When the message ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Lieutenant Nicole Grant broke the silence. "Sir, we could help them," she said quietly. "Our defensive technology works. We could share the specifications, give them a chance." Jake shook his head. "Our orders are clear. Defend human space, nothing more." "But sir, we're talking about billions of lives, species going extinct. Can we really just watch?" Jake looked at her with tired eyes. "Lieutenant, 6 months ago we offered them everything. We gave them data, analysis, tactical plans, offers of cooperation. They threw it all back in our faces. They called us paranoid warmongers. They dismissed our science as primitive. They made it absolutely clear that they did not want our help or our input. Now their people are dying because of decisions their leaders made. That's tragic, but it's not our responsibility." Another officer spoke up, a young man named Chris Wade. "What if some council members want to defect? Come to human space for protection?" "Denied," Jake said flatly. "We closed our borders for a reason. We're not taking in refugees from the council. They made their bed, now they sleep in it." The discussion ended there. Human forces maintained their positions along the border, watching the disaster unfold in council space but taking no action. Occasionally, desperate ships tried to cross into human territory, fleeing the swarm. Human defense platforms turned them away, sometimes with warning shots to make the point clear. The borders were sealed. No exceptions. On the human homeworld, public opinion divided sharply. News broadcasts showed images of the destruction in council space. Cities going dark. Populations fleeing, ancient civilizations crumbling. Some humans felt sympathy and wanted to help. Others felt vindication that the arrogant council was finally learning humility. The debate raged in media, in government, in homes across human space. Senator Helen Price, who had served as humanity's military liaison to the council for years, addressed the assembly. She had friends in council space, colleagues she had worked with for decades. Watching them suffer tore at her heart, but she understood what was at stake. "We did not create this situation," Helen said, her voice steady despite her emotional turmoil. "We warned the council. We offered solutions. We were willing to stand with them against this threat. They rejected us, not politely, not with respect, but with contempt. They called our scientists primitive. They called our military paranoid. They made it clear that humanity's place in the galaxy was beneath them, that our contributions were unwanted and our concerns were invalid." She paused, looking at each assembly member in turn. "Now they want us to save them. They want us to risk human lives and human resources to fix a problem they created through their own arrogance. And some of you think we should do it anyway, that we should be better than they were. But I ask you this, if we save them now, what do they learn? That they can dismiss us, insult us, and reject us, and we'll still come running when they need help? That there are no consequences for treating humanity with contempt?" The assembly voted again. Should humanity intervene in council space? The result was even more decisive than before. 300 votes against, 8 in favor. Humanity would defend its own people and its own territory. The council would face the consequences of its choices alone. In council space, the situation grew increasingly desperate. The swarm adapted to every defense, learned from every encounter. A Vexar scientist discovered that certain energy frequencies could temporarily disrupt the swarm's coordination, buying precious minutes for evacuations. But without the manufacturing capacity to produce disruption devices in useful numbers, the discovery changed little. The Lythian homeworld finally fell on a day that would be remembered in galactic history as the Day of Silence. The ancient world, birthplace of wisdom and philosophy, went dark all at once. The swarm overwhelmed the defenses in hours. Billions of Lithians fled on overcrowded transport ships, watching their homeworld die behind them. The eldest Lithian, who had lived for 5,000 years and remembered the dawn of their space age, refused to evacuate. He stood in the great library, surrounded by texts older than most species' civilizations, and waited for the end. The death toll climbed into the tens of billions. Entire species went extinct. The smaller ones, the ones without powerful fleets or wealthy colonies to flee to, simply disappeared from the galaxy. Council records showed their existence, but they were gone now, consumed by the swarm, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds and fading memories. Some council forces managed to slow the swarm's advance through desperate tactics and sacrifice. A Krell admiral drove his flagship directly into the swarm's densest concentration, detonating the ship's reactor in a massive explosion that destroyed billions of nanomachines. It bought 3 hours for a colony evacuation. The admiral and his crew of 20,000 became heroes, remembered for their sacrifice, but it barely dented the swarm's overwhelming numbers. Slowly, painfully, the remaining council forces began to coordinate better. Desperation forced cooperation that pride had prevented. The Vexar shared their disruption technology. The Krell deployed their hive minds' tactical calculations. The Lithians contributed their ancient knowledge. Working together, they managed to establish defensive lines that could hold, at least temporarily. A group of Vexar scientists, working with salvaged human data that had been left behind, managed to reverse engineer partial versions of humanity's defensive barrier technology. They used long-range scans of the human border, analyzing how the human defenses disrupted the swarm. It took 3 months of desperate work, and their version was far less effective than the human original. But it was enough to slow the swarm's advance. The swarm was finally stopped at approximately 1/4 of its way. 10 years had passed since the swarm was finally contained. The Galactic Council existed in a form that would have been unrecognizable to its former glory. What had once been a grand coalition of hundreds of thriving species was now a desperate alliance of survivors clinging to whatever they could salvage. The Great Council chamber on Vexar Prime was gone, consumed by the swarm. The Lithian homeworld lay empty and dark. The Krell hive mind, once unified and powerful, had fractured into dozens of smaller collectives that barely communicated with each other. The new council met in a station orbiting a minor world at the edge of what remained of their territory. The station was functional but plain, built from salvaged materials and designed for survival rather than grandeur. Representatives who once wore elaborate robes and carried symbols of ancient power now dressed in simple clothes and focused on practical matters like food distribution and refugee resettlement. Zek Thul, the Vexar scientist who had dismissed human warnings so long ago, still lived. He served on the Council's Science Advisory Board, but he was a changed being. His crystalline skin had lost its color permanently, stress having drained the vibrant patterns that once marked Vexar pride. He moved slowly now, carrying the weight of guilt like physical chains. Every day he remembered standing in the old council chamber and calling human science primitive. Every night he calculated how many billions might have lived if he had simply listened. The council tried to function as it once had, but the old divisions kept emerging. The Vexar wanted to prioritize rebuilding industrial capacity. The Lithians insisted on preserving what remained of their cultural heritage. The various Krell hive minds competed for resources to strengthen their individual collectives. Arguments that would once have been resolved through compromise now threatened to tear the fragile alliance apart completely. A young Lithian representative named Kelshan proposed sending another diplomatic mission to humanity. She had been born after the catastrophe, raised in the refugee camps, and taught the history of what pride had cost her people. She believed humanity might be willing to reconsider their position after so much time had passed. The proposal sparked intense debate. Some council members supported the idea, desperate for any chance to gain human technology and expertise. Others opposed it, arguing that humanity had shown their true nature by abandoning the galaxy in its darkest hour. A few simply felt too ashamed to face the humans after everything that had happened. The vote was close, but the proposal passed. Kelshan was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission, along with 2 advisors and a small security escort. They departed in a modest vessel, nothing like the grand diplomatic ships the old council would have sent. As they approached the human border, they sent a formal request for entry and an audience with human authorities. Lieutenant Nicole Grant, now Captain Grant, after 10 years of service, received the request at Nova Station. She had spent a decade watching council space from humanity's sealed borders. She had seen the catastrophe unfold, had compiled reports that detailed every lost world and every desperate battle. She knew the full cost of what the council had suffered. She forwarded the request to Earth and waited for instructions. The response came quickly. Grant them entry under heavy escort, bring them to the diplomatic facility on Luna, and inform human leadership of their arrival. Captain Grant dispatched 3 warships to meet the council vessel and guide them into human space. Kelshan watched through her ship's viewports as they crossed into human territory. What she saw stunned her. Human space was thriving. Cities sprawled across planets. Orbital stations orbited every inhabited world. Massive shipyards constructed vessels in assembly line fashion. The level of development and prosperity was shocking compared to the struggling recovery in council space. The human escort brought them to Luna, Earth's moon, where humanity maintained a diplomatic facility for the rare occasions when they dealt with other species. The facility was comfortable but austere, making it clear that this was a functional space rather than an attempt to impress visitors. Kelshan and her advisors were given quarters and told to rest before their meeting the following day. That night, Kelshan stood at a window looking down at Earth. She had studied human history, knew they were a relatively young species by galactic standards, yet here they were, prosperous and secure, while the ancient council barely survived. She wondered what humanity had done differently, what path they had taken while the council struggled. The answer was obvious but difficult to accept. Humanity had focused on themselves instead of trying to save others who refused to be saved. The next morning, Ambassador Daniel Wright met with the council delegation. He was older now, gray at the temples, but his eyes were still sharp and his bearing was still dignified. He sat across a simple table from Kelshan. No grand ceremony, no elaborate protocols. Just two representatives having a conversation. Ambassador Wright, Kelshan began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Thank you for seeing us. The council wishes to discuss reopening diplomatic relations with humanity. Daniel nodded slightly. I'm listening. Kelshan had prepared a long speech, carefully crafted to acknowledge past mistakes while appealing to human compassion. But looking at Daniel's calm, patient expression, she realized speeches wouldn't work here. So she spoke from her heart instead. The council was wrong, she said simply. Our leaders were arrogant and foolish. They dismissed your warnings because they couldn't accept that a young species might understand something they didn't. That pride cost us everything. 30 billion dead, entire species extinct, civilizations that lasted thousands of years reduced to scattered refugees, all because we were too proud to listen. Daniel's expression didn't change, but he gestured for her to continue. I was born after the catastrophe, Kelshan continued. I grew up in refugee camps listening to survivors talk about the old days. The elders speak of you, Ambassador. They remember your presentation to the council. Some of them wish they had voted differently. Many carry guilt that will haunt them until they die. The new council is different from the old. We've learned, but we're struggling to survive, and we're asking if humanity might be willing to help us. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was not unkind, but it was firm. What exactly is the council asking for? Trade relations, technology exchange, perhaps eventually a renewal of the defense agreements we once had. We're not asking for charity. We can offer resources, labor, whatever humanity might need. We just need a chance to rebuild with help from someone who knows how to thrive. Daniel stood and walked to a window overlooking the lunar surface. Miss Kelshan, you weren't there when the old council dismissed our warnings. You didn't see the contempt in their eyes when they called our science primitive. You didn't hear them laugh at the idea that humans could understand something they couldn't. You weren't there when they voted to ignore a threat that would kill billions of their own people, just because humans were the ones who warned them about it. He turned back to face her. You've learned from the catastrophe. That's good, but the lesson was expensive and humanity paid a price too. We paid it in relationships destroyed, in trust broken, in the knowledge that we tried to help and were rejected. You want to reopen relations now because you need something from us. But where were you when we needed respect? When we needed to be heard? Kelshan felt tears forming in her eyes, but she didn't look away. You're right. We only come to you now because we're desperate. But Ambassador, I was a child when all this happened. Many members of the new council weren't even involved in the old one's decisions. Should we continue to pay for mistakes made by leaders who are mostly dead now? Yes, Daniel said flatly. Not because I want you to suffer, but because that's how consequences work. The old council's decisions echo forward through time. Their children and grandchildren live in the world those decisions created. That's the nature of leadership. When leaders make terrible choices, entire generations suffer for it. He returned to his seat. Here's what humanity will offer. We will establish limited trade relations. Essential goods only. Paid for at fair market rates. No credit, no charity. We will share basic defensive technology that will help you protect what you have left, but not our most advanced systems. We will not send advisors, will not station ships in council space, and will not involve ourselves in council politics or conflicts. And the borders stay sealed to immigration. If your people want to come to human space, they apply through proper channels and wait like everyone else. Kelshan had hoped for more, but she recognized the offer for what it was, a lifeline, even if a thin one. The council will accept these terms. Thank you, Ambassador. Don't thank me, Daniel said. Thank the human citizens who voted to give you even this much. Many of them wanted to leave you with nothing. They remember how humanity was treated, but enough of them believe that holding a grudge forever serves no one. So we'll trade with you, help you with basics, and leave you to rebuild on your own. Maybe in another generation or two. When the lessons have truly been learned, we can discuss deeper relations. But not now. Not yet. The meeting ended. Kelshan returned to council space with an